Refugees and housing advocates and the African Canadian collective ACC gathered at Queen's Park, Ontario's legislative headquarters, to call on federal and provincial governments to address the urgent and persistent shelter and housing needs of African refugee claimants in Canada.
But we need the federal government and the Ontario government to step up, not just to talk about the funds that they're going to be giving, but we need those funds to actually hit the pavement in Toronto and many other cities that are finding themselves in crisis because they are overpopulated with not just Canadians, but also newcomers. We're speaking on everyone's class for housing. We need it right away.
At the press conference held Friday, July 26, 2024, the African Canadian Collective shared an update on what has been happening to African refugee claimants over the past year.
And we want the government to know, and we were here last year on July 14th, and we spoke to the City of Toronto and the federal government and others about not going anywhere until we get solutions. We are back a year later. We are thankful to the folks that have worked with us, and we really appreciate, and I thank everybody who spoke about the achievements we've made so far through the relationships we've developed.
The advocates demanded that all levels of government work immediately to address the persistent shelter and housing crisis affecting African refugees. In July 2023, the African Canadian Collective brought together housing and refugee advocates to shed light on the plight of refugee claimants arriving from African countries after they were left on the streets of Toronto and housed and without community services or support. 1 year later, more people continue to arrive and are being dispersed to communities across the province without adequate wraparound support in place. Advocates called on the government authorities to catalyze the process of opening the promised refugee claimants reception center in the Peel region as part of the solution to the problem.
Around July 2023, there was a discussion of a major part of the solution to the problem. And that solution was the creation of a reception center in the region of Peel. I want to update you that as of this morning, because I wanted to make sure that I have the most updated information, I was able to connect with Peel Human Services, and they indeed confirmed that yes, the funds for the operations are insufficient because they did not come with the funds for the exit programs. And we don't want to end up with a situation where our brothers and sisters are in a shelter and they have no exit strategy.
The reception centers' overall purpose will be to provide information and orientation on triaging refugee claimants to emergency shelters.
The announcement of the establishment of a regional reception center for refugee claimants in Peel region, whose purpose was to basically provide orientation and veritable information on how to triage refugee claimants to either Toronto, shelters, or to other municipalities in Ontario.
Walid Kogali Ali, a housing advocate, echoed the urgent need for increased investment in affordable housing, transitional housing, and shelter spaces, noting that despite promises from various levels of government, investments in affordable housing and shelter spaces are severely lacking.
Lack of adequate investments. Despite promises from various levels of governments, the investments in affordable housing and shelter spaces are severely lacking. The federal government, the provincial government, and our municipal governments across Ontario must recognize the growing crisis and take decisive action. Our communities are facing an unprecedented demand for housing, and the current measures are simply not enough to meet the need.
The African Canadian Collective and partners are calling for decisive action from provinces, cities, and municipalities across Ontario to step up for African refugee claimants and support them to thrive.
We are here to make sure that every single refugee claimant is thriving.
Advocates expressed satisfaction with the slow progress in addressing the African refugee claimants' housing crisis and their journey to integration into the Canadian society, and that this has left many feeling helpless, disconnected, and not welcomed.
It's a bit emotional and sad to see ourselves still trying to help our brothers and sisters who are still struggling with resources, shelters, being integrated to the family, being as well immigrants coming in the 80s, I understand what it feels to welcome African refugees that came in and wanting to communicate and integrate with their own community and have a bit of sense of home. On a daily basis, on a weekly basis, spending a lot of time with a lot of African refugees, that spark is no longer there. They are feeling helpless, they're feeling sad, they're feeling disconnected, not welcome. It's been very emotional journey for them and us.
Refugees who arrived at the center of the crisis in the fall of 2023 were made to seek refuge at churches or sleep on the streets with limited resources and supplies and with no proper structures on who to reach out to for support.
We arrived in the height of the crisis. There was no proper structure of where we should go. So we stayed in a church. An emergency shelter was put up, and most of the times we would run out of supplies, and we were not sure who to call because we were not being supported by the government. So it was quite difficult. We did not know exactly this is the way you should follow, or that is the way, this is the way we should go. It was quite difficult at that time. And also finding a shelter then, it was really, really hard.
Advocates are also demanding increased funding and resources from both the federal and provincial governments to invest in pathways for permanent housing like the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit Program, COHAB, and other essential wraparound supports and services for refugee claimants.
There's the Canadian-Ontario Housing Benefit. This is a portable benefit for people who have low income, who have no chance of getting housed. Obviously, the demand far exceeds the resources that we have, but what we have seen is that since March of 2024, this year, there are no more COHAB allocations whatsoever, neither for the local population who are living in refugee, the regular shelter system along with refugee claimants. And what that's causing is bottlenecks, is basically people who have been for over 6-7 months, at our shelters, emergency shelters, are not able to be housed.
Addressing the crisis and closing the refugee claimant service gap also requires working with grassroots organizations that are providing wraparound services that are delivered using culturally appropriate approaches.
We have organizations that we have been working that are well experienced. They're considered as grassroots organizations, not because they don't have the years of experience or they don't have the passion or the know-how, but because they're not on the, I would say, preferred list of governmental agencies and organizations that they like to work with and partner with. And this has caused a great gap and delay in the advancement of the newcomers and all the vulnerable people as they're trying to integrate into the society.
Story compiled by Patrick Message King for Amplify Media 01. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.